For this project, we are going to be focusing on the hand and using hands to create meaning. So, hopefully, you all remember from Art 1 and even at the beginning of this year, we started off with some blind contour drawings that included drawings of our hands. Um, And we do blind contour drawing to really focus on our observation skills. And using observation is especially important for hands because they have so many small but significant details. All of the wrinkles in the bends of our fingers and even fingernails, they all really impact how we view hands and how hands can express meaning. We also did some modified contour drawings of hands, which is where you get to look at your paper a little bit so that all of your proportions line up a little better. But we're still really, really focusing on all of those wrinkles and lines and how all the parts of the hand are connected. This is called a cross contour drawing, and cross contour drawings are meant to show volume. So that's how much space something takes up. It shows form. So all of these curves that wrap around the hand are meant to show the form of the hand rather than viewing it as more two-dimensional. You can see how the fingers and the palm curves. To really break down the hand and understand how it moves, it's helpful to view it as many different geometric type shapes. So you can see here that wherever things bend, there is a circle to represent that joint. So our wrist bends, the base of each finger bends, and then each finger is broken down into 3 sections. And if you look at your own finger, you can see that each one bends independently. Sometimes it's helpful to view a hand using the block method, which is another way to show volume. So if you hold out your hand and you look at the back of your hand, you can see that the back of your hand and the tops of your fingers are all one flat plane that you can run your hand over. But there are also other sides to the hand. There are the sides of each finger, or if you pull your thumb in, like you're making holding up 4 fingers, there's a different plane there on the side of the thumb. So sometimes it can be helpful to think about this when you're drawing a hand so that they look more three-dimensional than flat. For this project, you're going to display your hands or someone else's hands in a dynamic pose. So that means that it's not just lying there. It should be holding or touching or carrying or grabbing or balancing. It should be dangling or tangled in something. And there are a ton of different objects you can use to help you communicate your message. For this project, you can use any media that you have used before in an art class with me. Anything that is in your art supply kit is fair game. So that's, shading pencils, charcoal, oil pastel, colored pencil, watercolors. Any supplies you have at home are fine also, such as acrylic paint or collage. You may use some abstract techniques to complete your work, but your hand should be accurate. So the proportions should be correct, meaning that the size of the fingers are correct in relation to the size of the palms, etc. And it should be well rendered, which means that it's drawn, with attention to detail, and you have used appropriate value to show form. We really want to show the form of the hands here. We don't want them to look flat. Your artwork will be 9 by 12, which is the size of a page in your sketchbook. This is called the creation of Adam, and it is a strong example of how hands can create meaning and emotion in art. This artwork is part of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is in Italy, and Michelangelo painted that ceiling during the Renaissance. So the entire thing is covered in all of these different religious scenes. And this scene, the creation of Adam, is among the most famous. And these hands are really recognizable. Here we have Adam, who in the Bible is the first man, reaching out to God, and God reaching back to him. Like they're both like reaching for each other. It's mutual. There's so much emotion and like longing in these hand motions. So objects can give a lot of context to different hand positions. So if you look at these hands, there's a lot of different things they could be doing. When we discussed this in class, people suggested that they were perhaps doing letters in sign language, or maybe trying to create a heart with the fingers, or it looks like they were pinching something. When we add context with the camera, we have a different type of meaning. Rather than, say, creating a heart or communicating in sign language, we can tell that the person is taking a picture. So really consider how objects you use in your composition can create meaning and help people to interpret your artwork. A really strong historical example of hand motions conveying meaning is this raised fist, which was associated with the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party in the 1960s in the United States. The Black Panther Party was a community and political organization. It was founded in Oakland, California, and it began with its members going on armed patrols of Black neighborhoods to prevent instances of police brutality. They also did things like they started a free breakfast program for children, and they created a number of community health clinics to help prevent diseases and treat diseases that were impacting their communities. This image on the right is a really well-known image. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. It was a picture taken at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. Here we have the three athletes who won medals in the 200 meter. The gold medalist was Tommie Smith from the United States. The bronze medalist was John Carlos, also from the United States. And when they do the medal ceremony in the Olympics, they play the national anthem of the gold medal winner. So in this case, they play the United States national anthem. And during that anthem, Tommie Smith and John Carlos raised a black glove hand to draw attention to the issue of, Black oppression and human oppression is something that they were trying to communicate as well. In addition, all three athletes, so Tommie Smith, John Carlos, and the silver medalist, who was an Australian athlete, they all wore the Olympic Project for Human Rights badges, which is a movement and an organization within the Olympics at the time. So obviously, this was a very powerful symbol of protest. But as I'm sure you've learned, during the 1960s and the civil rights era, there was a lot of resistance to that sort of thing. So after this event, both of the athletes were suspended from the games, and they were banned from the Olympic Village, which is where the athletes stay during the Olympic Games. So there was a lot of fallout from this act. This image of a raised fist is still used today in the Black Lives Matter movement. So they've taken this image that has a lot of historical context to it and use it to communicate that this fight for equality and to stop police brutality is still ongoing. As the Black Panther Party fought for in the 60s, they are still fighting today. Another really powerful example of hands communicating meaning is that idea of putting your hand over your heart. It's something that we do every day when we say the Pledge of Allegiance. It's something that we do when the national anthem plays. So it's something that we as Americans are very, very, very familiar with. So when we have that image of placing a hand over the heart, we immediately think of patriotism, pride in our country, loyalty, things like that. Another local example is the sculptural hands, which are at the Christian Assembly Church in Seekonk, Massachusetts. That is down by the Rhode Island border. So take a second, look at these hands, and think about how you might interpret this gesture. So in class, we discussed how they're reaching for the cross. It seems like they are praising or worshiping or, trying to connect with cross, which obviously represents God and Jesus. So, it's very, very easy for us to interpret all of these different hand gestures that are more universal than we realize. A little fun fact for you guys is these are the largest sculptural hands in the United States. So now I want to do a little practice exercise with you. I know you're at home or wherever you are alone watching this, so don't worry about feeling silly. I want you to make a hand gesture that looks excited. A lot of the hand gestures that we saw in class were like outstretched fingers. People were doing like jazz hands. Some people were like clenching their fists like they just couldn't wait. Now make a hand gesture that looks tired. So a lot of students, when this happened, they like dangled their wrists downward. Their whole fingers went limp, like they were just so exhausted. Their muscles couldn't hold up their limbs anymore. Make a hand gesture that looks desperate. So for this hand gesture, we saw a lot of hands that were reaching out for something, and also a lot of like clenched hands with the palms pointed upward and the fingers curled in. Both, I think, are very meaningful. Then make a hand gesture that looks lazy. A lot of people made a similar hand gesture to what they did for tired, but an alternative for lazy is to, pick up your phone, hold it in your hand with your other finger, just start scrolling through social media. I know I do that when I'm feeling lazy. I'm sure you do too. Last, make a hand gesture that looks strong. So you probably did something like a clenched fist. Perhaps you brought your arms in there and showed some muscles. Either way, you were engaging a lot more muscles than you were for things like tired and lazy. Now I have several examples that I want to show you of artwork that use hands and gesture to create meaning. I'm just going to slowly scroll through each slide, and I want you to take note of the types of gestures, the materials that were used for these artworks, and also the meanings that they convey. Now we're getting some more student examples of artwork. And that's the last slide. Really consider what meaning you want to convey in your artwork. And consider how objects might help you to convey that meaning.